Let's start going over this. I am going to collect the data. Brandon, you need a calculator. You're not going to be able to answer the bell ringer, but. All right. So let's talk about these questions. All right. Remember, I am grading on active collaboration and participation in the class. There's a rubric already on your desk that I'm going to go over later today, but it's something you want to keep in mind as we go throughout the day. So, later today we want to figure out a typical number of starbursts students in the class could grab with a single hand, claw style. What type of study is this? I got a couple of observational studies, I got a lot of experiments, how much they can grab with selection bias, a measurement study. What do y'all think?
Experiment.
So why do you think it's an experiment?
I got to look on my notes.
Cool. Man, let him say his piece. Let's see what he says. He might convince us otherwise. Convince y'all otherwise.
This is an experiment. Like, why y'all think it's observation?
Hold on, I want to point this out. Y'all hear these conversations right here that's, I think it's an experiment. Why do y'all think it's observational? These are the kinds of conversations we need to have, these discussions to help push each other and push on each other's ideas.
I know it's experimental because you got to go in there, grab the candy, with one hand, cause them to
Okay.
Right.
Why do you think it's observational then?
But he's not really it's kind of like the asking one.
You're like you're not.
You got to compare it to them. They ain't like them.
Okay. Okay, so someone could be observing them or watching them, and I think that we're hitting on some of the good ideas. First off, I do want to point out, there's almost always going to be some kind of cause and effect. The question is whether we can prove the cause and effect. What do we need in order to prove the cause and effect? Look at your key terms maybe from the textbook if we already got it open.
You said we
You don't need it. Some of us already have it out though, and so I'm saying if you do have it out, look at it. You need a what? You need a treatment. What do we mean by a treatment?
Basically, the variables that
They're called experimental
Units.
not experimental units, experimental conditions or factors, right? The treatments are the experimental conditions or factors, meaning it is what the researcher is changing. What treatments are at play here? What is the researcher changing?
I ain't changing none, but the hand size will change.
Okay, but notice again, and that's an important distinction. The hand size might change, but is the researcher changing that?
no.
Oh,
So it's a what?
observation.
Observational study, right? We need to notice, is there an explanation for why different people can grab different amounts of starburst? Yes. Is the researcher changing things, applying treatments to see what that is? No. They're just observing what happens. And so it's an important thing to notice that there is a cause and effect, but are they proving it? No. Does that distinction make sense? Okay? So this is a great conversation, great mistakes. I love those mistakes because they helped us learn more. So, what is the characteristic of interest?
How many starbursts? How many they grab?
Okay? So the number of starbursts, I see that regularly through here. Man, there is a key word that we didn't include and I love it.
A single hand.
Why?
No. We didn't talk about the students because are the students a part of the characteristic of interest? No, they're part of the what?
Population.
Population and sample, right? That's what I was looking for. And so we want to recognize the characteristic of interest is just how many starbursts were grabbed, right? I would go a little bit more detailed than just number of starbursts, but it's number of starbursts grabbed. I would say I'd probably take out the word they or even you. It's just how many starbursts were grabbed or can be grabbed. That's what we're measuring. That's what we care about. Any questions from there? We good? That's what I'm saying. It's all about that growth life, right? Getting better and better every day. Okay? So, what is the population?
Students in class.
Ooh, so which one is it? So that's a good question. Could students in the class be the sample?
Well, color.
Yeah.
It could be, but it depends on the way we word the question. What am I asking about?
The students in the class.
I'm only trying to make a prediction about the students in the class. So who's my population? Students in the class, right? Could I sample some people from within the class?
So
Yeah.
you said like, he occurred students, and she observed the students in her class. Then the population could have been students, and sample could have been students in the class.
Right. So if it was about Hillcrest High School students, and then I could collect data from this classroom. Now, would I want to do that?
No.
Why not?
Because it's not.
What would that sample be?
Bias.
Biased. Notice that'd be a convenient sample, right? It would only be the students in this class, so this group of students may be different than the rest of the school, okay? But it is all about how we're wording it. I just want to know about students in this class, so I'm going to sample from within this class.
Right.
We all good on that? Anaya?
So convenient samples make them biased. And the
A convenience sample will be biased, yes.
Whoa.
So the random ones are non-biased?
Randomized samples are non-biased. Now, one thing to clarify, there are other things that can cause samples to be biased. Remember, there's the, because convenient samples usually go under selection bias, but there's also measurement and response bias. There's, what are the other ones we talked about? Volunteer response bias, and there's a few
Selection
other
bias.
biases. Huh?
Selection bias.
Yes, that goes under the convenient sample usually.
Is that the same thing?
No, convenience sample is a type of selection bias.
Oh.
Or it's a sample that would always have selection bias. They're just related. Does that make sense? Okay. So the question, what are some explanatory variables? Variables that could predict or explain how many starbursts a person can grab. And this is what Ralston was talking about earlier. The size of the hand matters, right? But again, is that what the researchers are changing?
No.
No, okay. So, hand size, what do we mean by starburst? Yeah, I think so.
I guess like, if you keep grabbing them, there'll be less, so you won't grab them.
Okay, if there's less starbursts in there, right, you can't grab as many. Yes, I'm
You doing one grab, man?
Huh?
You doing one, man?
Just one grab. That is one thing I do want to point out. Is there anything else that can predict how many starbursts a person could grab?
The strength?
Okay, their hand strength, which I don't know how we measure that. I mean, I'm sure there are things out there, but could your hand strength make it easier for you to hold on to more starbursts without dropping them? Yes.
How big? Oh, it says hand size.
Yeah, hand size.
How long your fingers are?
Okay, that's part of hand size. What about how tall you are?
Yes.
It depends. It depends on what you
Because
press
like
on.
if you're shorter, you'll be able to easily, grab a lot.
like
You're
if you're tall,
closer.
you can still do it.
But okay, so let me point this out, okay? This is not 100% or foolproof, but in general, we've already said hand size, right?
Yeah.
If you're taller, typically, do you have bigger or smaller hands?
Big. Big.
Maybe.
Taller?
I mean, no, small.
See,
Bigger.
pay attention.
Bigger. There. Focus in, right? Okay. So if we have a taller person, typically they have bigger hands, right?
Yeah.
So could their height explain how many starbursts they grab, right?
Like, I'm gonna grab more than you.
Yep.
On time.
I believe that, right? Okay. So what other explanatory variables are there?
Anyways.
If they drop,
I guess
if any
so.
starburst drop, I guess.
Okay, but that, I mean, yes, number of starbursts drop, but that's not something about you that could explain how many starbursts you
What
can
about
grab.
your nail being missing?
How about what?
Like us females who have acrylics, we'll be able to hold a lot more.
Oh, maybe if you have nails or not, so maybe guys versus girls could explain things? Now, I think that also depends a lot, because guys typically have bigger hands than girls, but
What
yeah,
about
if you have
some
nails.
But
I
I'm
mean, you
saying,
can put on some nails if you want. Okay, so whether we got nails or not, we got that. Let me ask you this, okay? All the variables we've talked about so far definitely could explain or predict how many starbursts a person can grab, right?
Right.
Are there other variables out there that may not predict how many starbursts you could grab?
Yeah.
Yes? Okay, what about hair color? Could that predict how many starbursts someone grabs?
No.
Probably not.
Yeah.
How about, huh?
the shoe size.
I just said that.
Actually,
But I do.
But
if you have bigger
if you got bigger
shoes,
shoes, I mean,
you probably have bigger hands
Yeah.
too, so maybe shoe size could be a predictor, right?
Possibly, because I know
Possibly.
people that short with big feet.
Right, and they got Yeah, and so it's not perfect, that's for sure. What about
Yep.
what about the amount of time it takes you to get to school in the morning, right? So the amount of time, so if you leave your house and you measure how long it takes you to get to school, could that predict how many Starbursts you could grab?
Possibly.
Possibly?
Yeah.
So what would we need to do to figure it out?
Might hurt your hand.
Okay,
Then if you're tired, you won't have enough strength. to
but
hold
what
on.
would we need to do to figure out if there is a relationship there?
Test it.
We need to test it, we need to collect
There you go.
data, okay? We're gonna do that later today. Look at several different variables like height, hand size, how long it takes you to get to school, other things like that, to see which one is the best explanatory variable for how many Starbursts you can grab. So we'll get to that later today, but first things first, let's look at our agenda. All right, I've passed back all graded assignments. We're not collecting homework today because I even already told you. We're moving to Tuesdays and Fridays. Remember the whole point of that is so that you can come in on Monday and ask questions for homework that is due on Tuesday, and then on Fridays because that way you have the rest of the week to work on homework and then ask questions before it's due on Friday. But we're going to talk about the collaboration rubric and then move into 3.9. I think we have to wrap up 3.7 just a little bit, but then we'll move into 3.9.
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit. Okay? So, grab the pink collaboration rubric. There's words there. Okay? So, I made it pink so that it jumps out at you. It should go towards the front of your notebook so you always know where it is. Okay? This is what I'm going to be grading you on. Now, a couple of things to be aware of. First things first. This is an active collaboration rubric. This is not assessing how well you understand the content. When someone left from first block today, she made a comment about how, where was I, Mr. Kenny? About a 3. And I was listening to one, and she said, because I didn't really know it, I tried, but I didn't know what was going on. When I looked at my grade book, I had her down as a 5. Because it's not about whether you know it or not, it's about how you're working within your group to make sense out of it. Okay? It is not whether you perfectly understand it or not. So, please be aware of that. Also, someone made the comment, what about the 5.5 and the 6? Okay, that's a different rubric. That's the rubric when I grade how well you did your work on assessments and things like that. Those are two different rubrics. And I feel like it's a safe assumption that you haven't ever been to many classes where they use rubrics everywhere. Is that safe to say?
Yeah.
Okay. The reason why I use a rubric is I want you to get feedback so that you know how to improve. I'm going to share this with everybody's parents today. I am also going to share a Google Sheet with your parents and with you, and I'm going to put your scores in every day. I'm not going to put the grade in until the end of the week, but I'm going to put your scores in every day so that you can see where I saw you that day and so that you can say, okay, what do I need to improve? Okay? It's not just giving you a grade, it is giving you feedback so that you can improve the way you're working in class. Because one of the most fundamental truths is those who engage and talk and work through the content with each other best are the ones who are going to learn the best. So I need y'all working and collaborating. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Is that an actual no, Robert, or are you just trying to be obstinate? That one? Okay. So here is how this rubric is going to work. A 5. This is advanced. This is like the top of the top of the top. And there's not going to be many 5s every day, I would assume, and I'll explain why that is completely okay in a minute. But notice the advanced and the engaged, the 5 and the 4 start out very similar. Student shares his/her, their insights and or thoughts about the presented problems or mathematical concepts, right? So within your group, you are consistently sharing what you're thinking about and working with others. The difference starts in the second sentence. At a 5, the student also seeks, listens to, and considers others' thoughts and perspectives. What's different about that for an engaged student? Seeks. Okay? You can listen to and think about what others are saying, but in order to get to that 5, you have to be seeking each other's ideas out. That means you have to ask them questions and really see what they're thinking about to get into that 5 level. Alright? At a 4, the student is asking questions of others' thinking to push for better understanding for self and or group. You should not just hear what others are saying, you should be asking those questions and seeking things. But the difference for a 5 is the student professionally critiques the reasoning, the thinking of others pushing for more clear understanding and explanation based on evidence from discussions in class, notes, or original thoughts. Right? So it's not just asking questions to push on, it's going back to your notes and saying, hey, but there's this thing that we studied, what do you think about this? Or do you remember when Mr. Kinney was talking about blank? Are you sure that your answer's right? Or have you thought about it this way? So it is going a little bit beyond and referencing things we've done in class to help with your questions. During whole class discussions, the student actively shares thoughts, asks questions, and takes notes. So notice there's a during whole class discussions part of it. You got to be engaged there as well. Here, same thing. The student actively shares thoughts, asks questions, and takes notes. Here is where one of the big places these are different. Advanced. You don't have to do this 100% of the time. That's not realistic. But it is consistent throughout the class. And the student shows clear leadership within the group for helping all learn. That is the seeking others' ideas and helping each other, right? So you are going above and beyond. And I had a couple of groups earlier today in first vlog where students actually made, multiple students in that group made a 5. That can happen. Like, leadership doesn't necessarily mean that one person does everything. It means that you take a role and say, I'm going to make sure that everyone's involved. And everyone can do that, okay? The big thing is, well, for an engaged, this doesn't have to happen 100% of the time, but it is at least 75% of class. So at least 3/4 of the class, you're doing this, and the student fully satisfies the role within their group. I haven't defined group roles yet. That's something we'll address next week. But the gentleman I developed this rubric with, he and I have been working heavily on developing group roles to help you, and sentence stems, to help you understand how to work within the group better. And so that's something I'll be introducing as well. So that's what we're shooting for, 4s and 5s. And I'll go ahead and tell you this. You do not need an average of a 5, or you do not need to score 5s in order to have 100 each week. So I'll collect the data every single day. I'll put in a grade at the end of the week. An average of 4s will get you a 100. You score 3s every day, that's 15 out of the possible 20 points, it's a 75. You get 5s every day, that's 25 out of 20 points, that means you made over 100, and you'll get that over 100. Okay? So it's that active collaboration that matters. We'll get on the first 2 sections. Okay? Developing. The student completes assignments and shares their work, but makes little to no attempt to understand how others are thinking or engage with peers about their thought process. So is it enough to just do your work? No. You got to be engaged. You got to be sharing and collaborating. But even here, right, you're not trying to understand. If you don't even share your work, where do you think you're going to drop to? 2. Okay? Students in this category may not be open to critiques of his or her work. There's a limited amount of interaction within the group or in fulfilling the group role. During whole class discussions, the student usually takes notes or actively shares thoughts, but is an either or. Below basic, the student is off task for a portion of the class period, but works at least 1/3 of the class, right? So if you're working at least 1/3 of the class, you can still get into that 2. But again, this is not where you necessarily want to be. Written assignments are completed, but attention during class is not consistent. That's also not sharing your ideas. Students have to be redirected to work on the class problems multiple times because they're distracting others or not doing anything could fall into this category. Right? So if I have to redirect you, put you back, and get you back on track, be aware you may be into that too. Major improvement required. Student does not complete in-class assignments. Assignments are attempted, but the student is off task the majority of the class period and disengaged from the discussion. This can be the result of sleeping, zoned out, distracting others for part of class. So, be aware that's where we can be dropping very quickly. Now again though, if it's at least 1/3 of the class that you're working, you're looking at a 2, but if majority of class, over 2/3 of class you're sleeping, boom, down to a 1. Not here. So please be aware, if you are not here, the student is not in class and did not complete the makeup work within the required time frame, or the student is present but does not participate for the majority of class, right? Again, sleeping, zoned out, that kind of stuff. You're looking at it not here. It is impossible to learn if you're not actively engaged. It is impossible to learn if you are not here. Now, a couple of clarifications. Let's say you get sick or you get COVID. You're not going to be here for multiple days in a row, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Is it fair to give you a 0 because you got COVID and had a quarantine? No. That's downright rude, okay? I'm not going to do that. If you're missing 3 days in a single week, I'm just not going to put in an active collaboration grade for you. If you miss a day, I will still be putting in an active collaboration grade for you, because even if you miss an entire day, if you score a 5 every single day, what do you have for that week?
20.
You would still have a 20, which means you have 100, correct? So even if you miss a day, can you still make 100?
Yeah.
Yes, right? Is it hard to make 5s? Yes, but it's still possible. Even if you just get 4s every day when you're back, you're still getting 16 out of 20, which is an 80%. Does this make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Do we have any questions or concerns about this active collaboration rubric?
Alright, so you complete the work, like, you're still gonna get 0.
What do you mean?
You said did not complete the makeup work within the required time frame.
Right. So if you were not in class and did not complete the required makeup work, then it's a 0. Right?
So you did do the work, like.
Yeah, so if you're not in class and you do the makeup work, yes, but it's kind of hard. That's more of an assignment that you have to turn in, and we don't turn in assignments very often, you know what I mean? Now, if there is a day where we turn in an assignment at the end of the day, yes. Okay. So like, you can earn higher than that, for sure. I don't think I would allow a 4 because you can't share your ideas, but a 3 is still better than 0.
Yeah.
That's a good question. That's a good question. Any other questions? Does this scare us or does this help us out a little bit?
It seems like it's hard to get a 5.
It is, but do you need a 5 to make 100?
No.
Right? Right? But remember, here's the other thing. If you think that you're at a 5 level and you're not, you kind of need to know that, right? That's why I'm going to be updating the Google Sheet every single day so that you can quickly see where I saw you in class that day. Because if you think you're at a 5 and you're really at a 3, you need to know that so we can fix it, or you can come and talk with me to say, hey, how can I improve? Does that make sense? So this is not just a grade to give you a grade. Grades should be assessments to help you improve, and that's why this is here now. Sound good? Cool. So let's look at our objectives. We are still trying to compare and contrast observational studies and experiments, goals and issues with studies. So we need to wrap up yesterday quickly with 3.7. Go ahead and please get that out. While you're getting 3.7 out, I'm going to go ahead and pass out the next thing we're working on, which is 3.9. It's on the back of 3.7. Say again. Yeah, it's right down the hall, take it right. Okay, so it's on the back of 3.7. Go ahead and get it out. No, that's 3.6. Or was it 3.6?
3.6.
Sorry, 3.6. My bad.
It's 2 different sheets, ain't it?
3.6 is what we're looking at, not 3.7. 3.7 is the lesson that I scratched. Okay, so we should have 3.6 out. We're looking at the back. For some reason it says application 3.7. I messed up somewhere.
That ain't the same thing on this paper.
Huh? It's not the same?
Somebody did.
Ah, I know what the issue is.
So you got 3.6.
I put the
ain't it?
wrong thing in there. Let's fix that. Haha, found it. Alright, get it fixed. Is this what it was?
Yeah.
Yes.
Cool.
You got me some extra.
Too bad I don't want it.
You know what?
Let's see. Alright. So, I think we already started on this a little bit, what happens when physicians study themselves. So, what did we say why it was necessary to perform an experiment?
Wanting to establish cause and effect.
Right, if we want to establish cause and effect, we have to have a what? An experiment, right? So, to establish, which you should already have this written down, but in case you don't, but to establish cause and effect, we need an experiment that reduces what? We didn't add this detail, that's good. Not bias.
Confounding.
There we go.
Yeah.
Remember, confounding is what prevents us from understanding the cause and effect relationship between independent and dependent variables. Bias is what makes a sample not representative of the population.
So confounding always goes with experience.
Correct. Alright. So, to establish cause and effect, we need an experiment that reduces confounding. Why was it necessary for the experiment to include a control group that didn't receive aspirin?
To see if.
You gotta get
Oh,
both
did,
sides.
did someone else already start talking?
Right.
Thank you. What were we saying, Nye?
To see if it really helped or they just thought it helped.
Okay, to see if it actually helps or sort of helps. Do we have any more details we want to add to that?
One for the placebo.
And you got to get both sides.
Okay, so part of it's placebo effect, part of it's to get both sides. I want you to think about it. If you just had the people who took aspirin and then 139 of them suffered heart attacks, do you know if that made them have less or had more or anything?
They don't know it all because they didn't take it.
Right. So we need someone to compare against. Why did we need a control group? The control group provides a baseline to compare against. Okay. One important detail about a control group is, when we look at this control group, did they receive a treatment with an active ingredient?
Yeah.
What did they receive?
The aspirin.
Did they? The control group did?
No, they took
No.
a dummy pill.
They took a dummy pill, which was testing what effect?
The
placebo.
Placebo effect, right? The control group doesn't have to include a placebo effect, but the control group is this is a group that doesn't receive the treatment. Okay? And with that, we need to be aware, sometimes they get a placebo. Right? We actually want to test, is it a mental thing or is it actually the medicine that's making a difference? Right? So the control group provided a baseline to compare against, but what we mean by a control group is that group didn't receive the treatment. Right? Sometimes they get that placebo because we need someone to compare against. Did the treatment actually make a difference? That's the question. Did the treatment actually make a difference? Looks like most of us have it written down. Anaya, did you define what a control group was? Okay. You had so much space.
But I want to save it in case you add anything else to the last minute.
Okay? So let's look at 3.9. Okay? I'll leave that up there for you, Brandon. Okay?
3.9.
Yeah, 3.9, the sheet I passed out just a second ago. Okay? So what is the question for 3.9?
Does listening to music improve your GPA?
Does listening to music improve GPA? Right? That's a good question to ask. So, please notice this is not on the board and this led to some confusion in my earlier class, so I want to make sure we read this together. So, in the box it says, some students at your school claim that listening to music while studying will help improve their GPA. Design a study to help discover this claim is true. Have you ever heard that listening to music while studying improves your GPA? Yeah, I think it distracts you, but there is a debate about whether it can help improve GPA. This is one of those things where, yes sir?
I need that.
I gave you one.
I think he gave me.
What's the date?
She gave, when he gave you one, I think you might have put it up.
Remember when y'all gave me an extra? Oh no, yeah, that was the other thing. It's fine, I got extras. So this is one of the reasons why we need to understand how experiments work and how studies work so that we can actually ask this question and collect data to determine if that's a true statement. Alright, and so in this context, here are 4 proposed studies, right? So I'm reading below the box. Here are 4 proposed studies for investigating the question of the day. Suppose we found that the mean GPA of students who listen to music while studying is significantly lower than the mean GPA of students who don't listen to music. What conclusions can we make? Alright? So the mean GPA is lower for those who listen to music while studying versus those who don't listen to music while studying. If you have an experiment, what are you trying to establish?
Cause and effect.
Cause and effect. So if you manage to reduce confounding, what can you establish?
That listening to music drops your GPA.
But, I mean, just in general, if you reduce confounding, what can you establish?
Cause and effect.
Cause and effect, right? The whole thing about an experiment is we want to establish cause and effect. If you have confounding, you can't really establish it very well. Okay? For an observational study, what are you trying to do?
Get a sample by the population and make a prediction about the population.
So we want to make a prediction about the population, which means our sample needs to be what of the population?
Accurate.
Accurate, there's another word I regularly use. Representative, right? We need our sample to be representative of the population. What can prevent that? Bias. Okay? So if we have an unbiased sample, we can say that our sample is predictive or representative of the population. Which of these would reduce bias and which of these would reduce confounding? Random sampling reduces what?
Bias.
Bias. Random assignment reduces
Okay.
confounding. In each of these 4 study designs,